Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. 120,000 for Bitcoin. This is awesome stuff. We're going to discuss quickly here, of course, the ETF net inflow, how that's relevant to this continuation higher, at least the potential of that, as well as some order block data, kind of giving us some firm indications that we have some interesting patterns forming here with specific altcoins. And then obviously some larger, more macro perspectives on liquidation here, and just letting us know that we may be due for a short-term correction. We're going to double check that and much more. Be sure to stick around. All right, folks, before you jump into the back-end data, I got a quick favor to ask you. Hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Let me know what your thoughts are here with Bitcoin. Are we going to go to 124,000 or 116K next? Taking a quick look here at the polls I posted just about 39 minutes ago, we can see majority of crypto YouTube is bullish at 124,000. Now, I've mentioned this previously that I do trust crypto Twitter over crypto YouTube, and crypto Twitter is signaling here that 116,000 is the likely next target. Now, it's not to say that either is right or wrong. It's just, I think there's a lot of influencers on social media, specifically on YouTube, that have a tendency of doing what everyone else is doing. Oh, Johnny on the spot over here is saying we're going up. I'm going to say the same thing. That's kind of the concept. So I know it seems contradictory considering I am also an influencer, which is weird to kind of say out loud, but the concept here remains the same. We look at the data. There's a lot of reasons why we see a short-term correction. I'm going to explain more so about that here in just a moment. So be sure to stick around. Also, a quick heads up too, we do have a Uptober sale. You can see that in the banner down below. Information's on our Discord. You simply shoot me a direct message if you have any questions. All my contact information is down below, but there's only 37 spots available, down from 50 already here in just a couple of days. So awesome stuff, but a lot of folks are jumping in or wanting to get that permanent access. I don't offer that. Actually, this is the first time I've ever done it. So just know that's available for you if you want. Links down below. All the contact information is down below. Now, the whole concept of looking at order blocks, just to kind of touch on this first, is to get us perspective on the heavily interested areas or zones here locally, which are pretty obvious that we're looking at, some selling pressure at between 119.6, 119.8. There's a lot of sell orders there, but there's also a lot of buy orders at 119,000, even more so, if you will. So the concept remains the same here. We're within about a $200 or $300 range. So this level of 120 to 119,000 is highly contested. That kind of lets us know that there's slightly more buying pressure than selling pressure at this point. But as you can see, there's really big orders coming through. We got 3 million here, 4 million there. Like people with billions of dollars are just buying and selling at their disposal. We'll look at candlestick patterns here in just a moment. I want to finish the Bitcoin kind of summary here first. And just to double check, Bitcoin exchange liquidation map, this kind of just lets us know the last 30 days where the liquidation is heavy the most. And we can see there's a lot more liquidation on the downside than the upside, essentially implying that shorts are becoming less relevant or not shorting quite as much, but also letting us know that there's more propensity for these longs, these late longs specifically, to potentially get hit hard soon, just based on market makers pumping up the price in light of some really stupid news here with the government shutdown. So it's kind of weird that this happened. Personally, I think it feels like a trap, and we got kind of our traps set, so to speak, if you will. We are short on a couple of coins right now. Obviously, if you're in my community, you'll know that, but when we look at the macro perspective here, this gives it a little bit easier understanding of where the liquidation's at. Obviously, there's a chunk below 110,000, but the amount of liquidation between now and 100 and just say the local high of 113K is pretty substantial. So I'm leaning more towards a potential correction. Do I think we're going to see 110K? Probably not, but I do think the 117 to 115K range, that local support range, is a decent chance that we see that retested before the next leg up. Now, I've been totally wrong in the past, expecting price to pull back, and it doesn't. So take this with a grain of salt. Make sure you average in if you are definitely on the bullish side of things. So I totally understand if you are. I'm more so macro bullish, but short-term corrections make sense. We've got two 36-hour overextensions in the last 3 trading days. So it leads me to believe that we are due to capitulate at least a little bit, that natural ebbs and flows. If we look here too, Bitcoin is giving us a 5, almost 6 to 1 ratio of shorts versus longs getting liquidated. Majority of altcoins, specifically coins we're planning to look at here, are about a 3 to 1 ratio. That implies they have less potency with Bitcoin. In other words, they're not moving up quite as fast as Bitcoin. And when that leverage differential is kind of higher, when you see that kind of difference there, that implies they're more likely to sell off harder if Bitcoin pulls back. So just be mindful. We are probably due to see some type of correction this weekend, specifically with altcoins. Now, granted, altcoin season index is still looking high. We have a good amount of altcoin cap dominance. It implies sustainability, right? We have more propensity for the price to go higher for altcoins. But it also implies we have that knee-jerk reaction happening right now where altcoins are probably more likely to pull back harder than Bitcoin, just based on that simple fact. So if Bitcoin does correct itself by a small margin, I think altcoins may be a 2x correction this weekend. That's just kind of the speculation based on the overview here. But there's no doubt about it. When we have high net ETF inflow, specifically for Bitcoin, Bitcoin dominance is increasing, altcoin dominance kind of plateauing and tapering off, generally letting us know that we have more propensity for the price action to start slowing down, but also a distinct probability of further upside and retesting your all-time high. Now, when I say that, I'm more so referring to longer term. I think we are more likely to go a bit higher overall, but once more, this chart kind of reflects what my thoughts are here. A pullback to the local high makes a tremendous amount of sense because we haven't retested the 117K range yet. We just kind of blasted straight through that in the last 24 hours. So natural pullbacks are very common and significantly expected, I guess you could say. All right, so let's take a look at the back end here and just kind of see where we're at in the overall sense with Bitcoin. Let's get a good little refresh first and double check just kind of the bigger picture stuff. When we look here, this is more so just the 4-hour time frame, but we can see we're now back into a greedish type of market there. And that's generally the concept, right? Now, if you recall correctly, a few days ago, we were buying the fear. I mentioned buy the fear at 110,000. Majority of those of you who did took really good profits on our trades, right? Now, at this point, it doesn't mean you just short because we're going up and the price is overextended. It also implies that we have a key level resistance and we want to sell the greed. Okay, so 120,000 seems like a very practical place to consider securing some profits. Once more, that's just a bumper sticker version. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. If you're part of my community and you read the trade alerts, you'll know why we're taking the trades that we take. We are short at Bitcoin 119.7, and I think we're short SUI at 357, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I'm shorting SUI again. I know. Conversation for another day. Don't give me too much heat, but it's begging to be shorted, and I'll explain more so about that here in a second. So all that being said, and we look here at the average top trader, they're starting to dissipate with their amount of short trades, and the amount of margin being used is lower. So generally speaking, when you see that happen, that implies that we're in a position right now where we're more likely to go a bit lower because there's less buying pressure, at least for larger positions. Now we look at larger positions. Speaking of which, these are the $100,000 to $1 million position sizing. This is super high. In other words, really high compared to the recent volume rather. So it does imply that whale traders are active right now, okay? And also, interestingly enough, this happens almost all the time. When we see whale traders increasing, retail goes down. So most retail traders probably getting shaken out here, shortened all the way up to the 120K range, are likely have left, no dry powder left, and the whales are just having fun with it, right? That's just kind of market makers 101, unfortunately. And I don't think a lot of people foresaw the price action pumping in light of a government shutdown. Like, how is a negative fundamental catalyst a positive thing in crypto? That kind of leads me to believe that there's more going on than just what we see here. So now that there's a lot of late longs trapped, what do you think is going to happen with the price action? Okay, now it's not a guarantee, of course. It's just a larger statistical probability based on some backend data that not a lot of people look at. Okay. Looking here, though, to kind of recognize locally, this is more so, more macro, but it's a local number. 117,500 is that local area of control based on volume and open interest. So that tells us that 117 should provide some support if we come back down that low. Liquidation long delta is still very high, so it is inherently more risky to consider shorting than taking it long right now. But it's also less risky, mainly because look at all this liquidation that's been fully swept here. Granted, there's a lot of late shorts here jumping in between 121 and 124, but the consensus here remains the same. Pretty much everybody that felt that they were safe with a liquidation event or a stop loss at 120 just got hit super hard. And now the whales are like, okay, cool. We don't have any more opposition left to the upside. What do we do now? We take profit. That's generally a concept. So that's why we're seeing whale data increasing. We can also recognize, too, we're at 99% for our open interest delta. And that is super high. Anything over like 80% is truly bullish. So once more, that does kind of reinforce potential problems if you're considering a short, right? It just depends on your take profit targets though, because most people who try to short at this level, they're going to be super greedy. They're going to try to take profit 110 to 100,000. Probably because they've been watching a lot of influencers telling us that we're going to go down. When the truth is, we're more likely to go higher based on a lot of stuff that we've looked at so far. But a short-term correction makes sense. At least it does to me. And once again, I'm perfectly fine with being wrong on the price going up right now. That's actually no problem because spot bags are doing well, right? But on the same accord, you just gotta use proper risk tolerance in these situations, and you're gonna be much better off. All that being said, points of control here. Let's identify some positive and negatives if there is any. 117.5 with our volume here locally. So ever since we've been on the 105K range or higher, we've seen the most amount of volume at 117.5 specifically, and 115.5. We identified that yesterday. It's basically like a little support channel. So the concept here remains the same. If the price does pull back, that's a very logical pivot point for us. So I'm interested in the long in the 117 to 115K range as a rough estimate, all right? Mainly because that's our local high. That hasn't been retested as a new low, but also a lot of volume support. So that's kind of the concept there. And just keep in mind, I'm not thinking this because we have a wonderful, type of support there based on Fibonacci. Fibonacci only matters if there's confluence with it, right? So please understand that. Yes, we have 116K as a 0.5 fib level, but that means very little if nothing else is, there with it. All that said, daily time frame also recognizing we are looking pretty good here with stochastic swinging up and MACD converging. We're not over 50 in the RSI. Sorry, the money flow index is not over 50. So this does imply weakness. What I mean by that is that there's more selling pressure than buying pressure right now, or just not enough money flowing into Bitcoin to sustain this price point. So that does increase the odds of further downside because money flow index tells us that there's, it's kind of a volume component, right? It takes volume and essentially gives us an average. And with that being under 50, more so specifically under the RSI, we're seeing this coin is overextended without sustainability potential. While you could argue we have higher volume here, it's not respected to the last 14 trading days. And that's why MFI is a super important indicator. Most people don't use it correctly or don't use it at all. So highly recommend learning about that if you don't yet already. Take a look here at the 4-hour time frame. Last but not least, we're above all moving averages. Everything's super bullish. The concept remains the same here. Until we drop below 70 in the RSI, you generally don't want to consider securing profits. I would generally say that's not a greatest strategy right now because 120,000's proven to be a solid resistance level. If you didn't notice this here, there was, with the exception of one outlier, we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost 11 days where the price action took that much, that many reattempts to break that level. We broke above it, swept the late shorts there, and the price pulled back. We're probably likely seeing the same exact thing here, where it's going to take a good amount of attempts to break through that level, right? So we're probably going to cup and handle out or flag out is what my thoughts are here, where the price action will work its way down, trap late shorts, and take off. That's what I'm expecting. So that's why I feel 117.5 to 115.5 are good practical areas of consideration for longs. Between now and then, a lot can change, so don't get too dead set on that. Let's continue to remain gelid and continue to just be cautiously optimistic. Try not to attach yourself to a specific bias right now. While we have broken moderately bullish on a short term, right, we're doing pretty decent here in the overall. I am still not fully convinced this isn't a trap, all right? So that's kind of the case there. All right, folks, thanks again for learning as much as you can with our Bitcoin analysis. Let's go ahead and take a look here next at some altcoins. Quick heads up to my traders, make sure you take full advantage of this offer here from Bitunix. There's a significant deposit reward bonus as well as a $16,000 individual reward for just trading on the exchange. If you use my link to register in the past, you're automatically eligible. If you use my link to register now, you're eligible for all future trading bonuses and competitions. Check out the links down below for more information. All right, folks, take a quick look here at Ethereum. And just so you know, too, I have our macro fib levels pulled up here. We've got some confluence in the 45-50 range. We'll talk about that. But more specifically here, just kind of giving you perspective, we broke through 4,300, 4,400, that resistance range for us. So if the price does pull back, we can expect those to be support levels, right? So be careful, considering like some high risk short positions right now. If you're considering a short, I absolutely insist on low leverage, low position size. Make sure you work within tight margins because shorts right now are inherently more risky just based on how altcoins are responding fairly well to Bitcoin's pump. While they're not quite 2x of Bitcoin, they're running consistent with it, and there's more propensity for to see some explosive moves here. Simple way to put it. Now, taking a look here though at just open interest, there are some areas 45.50. There's that area of confluence with that golden pocket, but more importantly, 43, 4400 are those previous areas of open interest below the price. All that said, liquidation long delta is super high at 14 million. 14 billion. That's quite a lot for this coin, but also less than Bitcoin. So the important thing to recognize is that Ethereum, while it's still strong, it's not quite as strong as Bitcoin. It's absorbing less market capitalization as Bitcoin. And we saw the ETF inflows are lower for Ethereum than Bitcoin, generally implying that this pump is potentially potentially a little bit, I wouldn't say false, but it's like it's a low volume pump, or just more importantly, we're not seeing a ton of sustainability that the price will just go straight up from here. Okay. All that being said, we look at the monthly here for liquidation. There's a chunk at 45.50. Once more, areas of confluence there, 46.50, 4800. So there's a lot of shorts that could very well get hit upwards of that all-time high range of 5,000. Okay. So just kind of giving us some perspective there. ETH could very well continue to run based on liquidation and the fact that we've shifted from our short delta to long delta. Now, take a look at the daily time frame once more. 45.50 is probably that local resistance for us. That's an area of open interest, but also just in general here, we're looking at that being a range of, somewhat of a range there, likely to be retested. Okay. Now, because golden pocket, the fib levels, they work like magnets in a lot of ways, especially with open interest being there too. I think 45.50 makes like a very, very much logical sense in the near future. All that being said, we are looking pretty decent here with the exception of money flow index being low on the daily time frame. I don't love to see that. That kind of is not great, but we do have a MACD convergence, a lot of positivity here in the overall sense. So I do like what I see for Ethereum in that sense, but we are at a 9 on TD sequential, letting us know we've been moving in the same direction for 36 hours. That's not great. That oftentimes implies that the price will pull back on the short term. And once more, if the price were to pull back, two areas of interest would be 4,400. That's his local high here, and then 4,300, that previous high, kind of that neckline for the inverse head and shoulders. Okay, so those are areas I'm going to be looking for Ethereum if the price were to be pulling back. But at this point, we can see liquidation long delta is looking pretty good here overall. The situation looks pretty decent for the RSIs. All right, let's move on to Solana next. Taking a look here at Solana, the important thing to recognize here for all right, taking a quick look here at Solana. Let's start with the backend data to kind of see what's going on. We can see that 210 is that area of support. We're a long ways away from that, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if we do end up pulling back, once more, 210 to 215 was a lot of volume there based on open interest. 235 is that next area of consideration, though. If you're going to consider a take profit target, 235 seems like a sensible location. I wouldn't be surprised if Solana continues to run. We have a lot of liquidation to the upside, or for lack of better terms, we have more people taking longs than shorts, and that increases the odds of continuation higher. 230 is the kind of that local area there of liquidation. There's not a lot left there on the macro. We got to zoom in a little here and kind of see if there's anything different. The last 7 days tells us that we are pretty much not seeing a lot of liquidation. So people are not shorting this coin, which makes perfect sense. It's exactly why the price continues to run. So my speculation is we're going to hit these overextension levels, which we already kind of are, between 230 and 235. And we'll probably see a short-term correction that way. We can also recognize that our local low basically should be considered a new high is about 232. So these levels here are just some areas to kind of pay attention to. We're coming up into a resistance range. Slowly, a slow capitulation here for Solana makes a lot of sense to me. Now, it's still very bullish, so you want to be very careful of shorting, but the general consensus here is that we've broken over 50 and 20 on the RSI. Money flow index is still low. Gives me pause for concern there, of course. We've identified that already with other coins, and stochastic swinging up and MACD converging. There's a lot of bullish behavior here. So the truth is the price should continue to run. That's kind of the consensus. We want to expect that, but I think a short-term slowing pressure and or selling pressure at the 230 to 235 makes a perfect amount of sense. We've also got a point of control here above the price at about 237. So area of resistance is approximately 230 to 237, and areas of support locally here is 212 to about 217. And those are kind of the important areas to pay attention to. Just before we take a look at the next altcoin, I want to recommend you consider trading with Bitunix. If you use my link to register down below or have in the past, you'll always be eligible for future trading competitions, but this one is awesome. It's probably the best one I've seen yet, with a full-on $16,000 individual prize pool, as well as a collective prize pool as well for the top 30 traders. Be sure to check out the link down below for more information. All right, let's take a quick look here next at SUI, see kind of what's going on here. And SUI is an interesting one. It's definitely very bullish in a lot of ways. So I don't want you to get misinterpreted or to misinterpret the fact that I'm shorting this coin at really tight margins. May not even work out. It's based on the premise that Bitcoin is going to be pulling back here soon. Now, all that being said, though, we can see we have some resistance at 360. That's held so far already the first time we attempted to break it and likely to continue to hold. But once more, with liquidation long delta being fairly high at about 400 million, quite a lot for this coin. There is decent propensity we do see the price continue a bit higher to sweep some of these liquidation levels. There's not a lot of liquidation left locally. There's a little bit at 360, but there's a big chunk at 380. So if we close above 360 today on the daily, for example, that would be a good indication we're probably going to go higher, with the under the impression Bitcoin isn't taking a nosedive, right? Because that's really what this is based off of as far as the price likely to be pulling back. Now, if you look at it kind of a comparison here, there's a lower time frame than the hourly time frame. We can see that SUI pulled back a lot harder than Bitcoin did, but right now it's sustaining pretty well in its current price, while Bitcoin is also doing so in its upper resistance range. So hypothetically, Bitcoin pulls back, SUI will too. It's going to establish lower highs and lower lows. But if Bitcoin continues to range, there's a decent chance we do see SUI push higher. So be very careful if you are considering shorting this coin, just kind of a general disclaimer there. Now, the daily time frame, this is something that's kind of interesting and cool, depending on how you look at it, of course. There's a bullish type of flag pattern. I do think we have a decent propensity for the price action of SUI to go higher. So if we look at this here, generally, you work yourself into a descending channel and the price will break out. The key here is that we want to close in this range of 350 to 360 in the next couple of days, and that would signify further continuation higher, remaining above that point of control, that midline, basically. Okay, so that's usually what you look for trend reversals, and we're starting to see the early signs of that. Now, we want to make sure that we have other signs confirming that. 50 is above, RSI is above 50, that's generally a positive, and but money flow index is super low. Now, money flow index is going to be low because it takes into consideration this most recent retracement. So it can be a false positive, but if you see convergence here on the MACD and then the 4-hour time frames too, showing that we're above 70 in the RSI, albeit overextended like most coins, there's still a decent chance that we do see sustainability in this price point and go higher. A lot of this depends on how the next 24 hours responds, or how SUI responds to Bitcoin in the next 24 hours. So if Bitcoin stays in its current range of just say 120K, I think most altcoins are going to continue to pump and go higher. But if Bitcoin corrects itself now, we've already identified that there's a decent chance that we see that corrective pattern to the downside for most altcoins based on the liquidation imbalance. So that leads me to believe that further downside makes sense too, under the impression Bitcoin pulls back. So it's kind of you need to have this happen in order for this to happen situation. So generally speaking, the safer play here is to not trade at all, because there is some conflicting information. But generally speaking, I'm under the impression or feeling like we're going to see a short-term correction for Bitcoin, and that should pull SUI back as well with it. But please understand, Bitcoin maintains 120K or closes at 120K or higher today. There's a pretty solid chance altcoins are going to respond positively and pump the price leading into the weekend. And then we may see some corrective patterns this weekend. Okay, so that's my consensus there on SUI. What are your thoughts? Why don't you let me know? All right, folks, last but not least, here is XRP. XRP is interesting. It's really, really starting to rally here. And this is very awesome because we talked previously about 290 to 303 being that solid resistance range. And it's literally punching through it with very little effort. So good stuff there. Bad news is the volume is moderately low in the overall sense compared to previous pumps, or at least those significant corrections in the recent past. So let's take a look at the back and see if there's anything telling here. So 303 is that point of control. Let's go ahead and get a refresh here. We can see that punch through that. And that's basically our open interest range too. So if we close above $3 today, we can presume that may be our new support level. Okay. Once more, all hinges on Bitcoin, because XRP generally follows suit with Bitcoin, but lately it's kind of breaking free from it too. And that's an important thing to recognize. That's another reason why considering a short in this coin right now may be a bad idea, just based on how strong XRP is looking versus Bitcoin. We'll do a comparative analysis here in just a second. But if you take a look here, 800 million in liquidation long delta, that's super high for this coin. And there are some liquidation levels, which are actually already just got hit there at 301, 302. So there was a good, I don't know, 1 to 2 billion in liquidation at 302 that just got hit really hard. So a lot of poor short sellers getting hit pretty hard there. As far as liquidation is concerned, there's still a chunk upwards of 315, 320. This is a macro perspective, but we still need to respect the fact that that could very well be the case. Taking a look here at XRP, just kind of quickly comparing. Once more, $3 is a resistance range, just kind of give you some perspective here. And Bitcoin hasn't surpassed its resistance of 120 yet, at least as far as a macro closure, right? We want a daily closure above 120. So ultimately here, if we look at XRP on the right and Bitcoin on the left, the best thing to understand here is that XRP blasted through its resistance level and Bitcoin hasn't yet. So that reinforces continuation potential higher for XRP. Now, there's a good chance, as per usual, we're going to see the price pull back for XRP, consolidate at $3 and go back higher. That's a general standard trading scenario. But at this point, with such high volume on a small amount of time or a lower time frame, that does imply sustainability for XRP. So taking a look at the macro perspective here, once more, we talked about this yesterday, having broken above that descending trend line, the macro descending trend, and also our short-term descending trend. So for the most part here, XRP is definitely broken bullish on the short term, but it's still far too early to say that we're going to the metaphorical moon. I'm sure there's tons of XRP analysts out there saying that. And the main reason why is because we just barely broke above the resistance, right? You need to give it time to develop at that range before you take a long and consider it, because market makers are very tricky. They get a lot of people to think that we've broken bullish, and then they flip it around on us. Now, with ETF inflows being fairly high for our Bitcoin, there's a good chance we do sustain 120,000. But if we don't, I think a lot of altcoins are going to pull back pretty significant, and this coin is no exception. All right. Now, taking a look at the 4-hour time frame, we've already identified the daily time frame is fairly bullish from yesterday's analysis. But if we look here, we've got a lot of confluence at 290. So if the price does break $3, averaging into a long position between $2.90 and $3 makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of support in that range, and what was the previous resistance is now the new support for us. But the concept here is that we're above 50 in the RSI. Money flow index is right there with it. Or sorry, we're above 70 in the RSI. That generally implies you don't want to short into that until the price action pulls back. In other words, we got to see how much longer we can sustain this range before we take a long or a short. So it's one of those interesting scenarios where you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't, right? If you take a long right now, it's going to pull back. If you take a short, it's going to pump. That's just kind of the concept. That's how crypto is. But for the most part, when coins perform like they are here, you want to presume it's going to go higher and treat the previous resistance as a new support. So averaging into the $3 even to the 290 range seems to be very sensible for a long consideration. Once more, descending trend line, potential retest the descending trend line and the leg back up again. Once more, basically trapping late shorts and early longs. Okay, so it's an interesting thing, but it is what it is. That's how crypto is. So important thing right now to recognize is that we're tentatively bullish on XRP, but don't be ridiculous and just take a bunch of longs right now that we've broken a tentative resistance. We haven't closed above $3 yet on the daily time frame. Until that happens, we need to kind of respect the fact that it's a little premature to take a long. All right, cool. Hope that makes sense. Thanks again so much for learning with me here today. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video. Take care.